The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Then they came to Capernaum, and on the Sabbath Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. The people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him and said, "Quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit convulsed him, and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed and asked one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." His fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
If you're like me, you've been blessed in your life to have some great teachers. Not all teachers are great, but hopefully you've had at least a few great teachers in your life. What is it that makes a great teacher? Well, first of all, a teacher needs to know what he or she is teaching, needs to have the necessary knowledge. Secondly, a great teacher needs to be able to convey that knowledge in a way that others can understand. A good teacher needs to be able to teach. And it's quite clear that a great teacher loves his or her subject matter. But even more importantly, a great teacher loves his or her students. Students can tell that the teacher really cares about them, not just as students, but as human beings, as persons. Just last year, Father John Dunn, who was a Holy Cross priest and taught theology here at Notre Dame for more than 50 years, passed away. I was always amazed by how Father Dunn's former students would come back to campus, and they'd bring their kids and their kids' kids, and many of whom were also Father Dunn's students. They'd come back to visit with him, to sit with him, to talk with him. It's clear that Father Dunn had a huge impact on their lives. Why? Because they could tell that he cared about them, that he loved them as persons. He didn't just care that they learned, and he certainly cared about that, but he cared about them deeply, and they could pick up on that. And because of that, he had a certain kind of authority with them. They gave him a certain kind of authority over him. They listened to him. They paid attention to him. They read his books. Today in the gospel, we hear how Jesus teaches with authority and not like the scribes. So what was the problem with the scribes? The scribes certainly had authority, the authority that comes with knowing the law very, very well. The scribes knew the law. In fact, you could say they loved the law. But it wasn't so clear that they loved people, the people around them, the people for whom the law was intended. As teachers, it wasn't so clear that they loved their students. Unfortunately, far too many of the scribes exercised their authority in a way that separated them from the experiences of ordinary people. Unfortunately, many of the scribes developed a system that marginalized people and left too little room for redemption. Unfortunately, many of the scribes exercised their authority to serve themselves and not God, who is love. Jesus exercises a new authority. Jesus teaches with a new and more powerful authority. It's the authority that comes from love. Jesus knew the law through and through. Jesus loved the law, but more importantly, he loved those for whom the law was intended, and he never mixed up ends and means. The law is a means to an end. The law is a means to love, and Jesus loved. The miracle that we hear about in the gospel is one example. Jesus sees the man as he enters the synagogue who's possessed by demons. It's essentially the demon's job to make this man unlovable. And so he was in the eyes of many. But Jesus sees not just demons, he sees the man, created in the image and likeness of God. He sees him and he loves him. And this love drives out the demons. The demons can't stand it. They failed to make this man unlovable in the eyes of Jesus, in the eyes of God. All of Jesus' miracles were performed based on love. They are acts of love. Jesus never performs miracles in order to receive acclaim or applause. They are not the product of some secret knowledge or formula. They are acts of love. They demonstrate the power of love. And nobody loves more than God. You know, we live in a world where people have authority over us. I certainly have a lot of people who have authority over me. I have my local religious superior. We have our provincial superior. We have the bishop. And I could keep going on and on. I have a lot of people who have authority over me. And thanks be to God, they exercise their authority with love, and they exercise their authority responsibly. And you have people who have authority over you of one kind or another. But then there's a different kind of authority that we give to people. We give people authority over us. Or we give things, unfortunately, sometimes we give things authority over us. So I think among other things, the readings today invite us to ask a question. One question is, to whom do we give authority over us? To what do we give authority over us? It's quite possible that we give authority over our lives to people who really don't care about us, who really don't love us, or at least they haven't expressed it very well. And sometimes we give authority over our lives to material things or to selfish ambition. And this leads to our ruin if we continue to allow these things to have authority over our lives. And today, as we celebrate this Mass, we are invited by God to let Him have authority over us, to let the power of love have authority in our lives, to let the power of love rule our lives. In Jesus, God never imposes His authority. He invites. He invites people to accept His authority. Love can never impose itself. Love always invites. And so we are invited by God to let Him have authority over our lives. And we are celebrating this Mass here together today because we want to let God have that authority over our lives. But all too often, there are distractions that prevent us from letting God truly rule in our lives. So let's pray that we might let God, the power of love, truly rule in our lives. And each one of us also has a certain kind of authority. So there are people who have authority over us, and we give people authority over us, but we also, each one of us, have authority of one kind or another. How do we exercise the authority we have? Do we exercise the authority that we have in a way that far too many of the scribes did? Do we use it to further our own selfish ambitions? Do we use it to serve ourselves? Do we use it to destroy others or to hurt others? Or do we use our authority to really help others? Do we use our authority to really help people through difficult times? Do we use our authority responsibly? Maybe it's the authority of parents over children. Maybe it's the authority of teachers over students. Maybe it's the authority that some friends have over other friends. Maybe it's the authority that is exercised by religious leaders or political leaders. Unfortunately, far too many people have abused their authority. Let's thank God here today for those people who have not abused their authority, the people who've exercised their authority with love in our lives. And let's pray that we might do our best to exercise our authority, the authority that we have, of one kind or another, in a Christ-like way, in a way that builds up, in a way that really helps people to find God in their lives and to accept the power of love.